Hello everybody, welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 27, I believe? Or is it 28? Might be 28. Let me look at the folder. Oh, 28. Episode 28. Welcome everybody. How is it going? Welcome 3D Viewmaster. It says you are a first-time chat on Twitch. And we got people popping in already on YouTube and Twitch. Start getting those questions together. We don't have too many announcements or things to talk about. We'll definitely be having a plugin launch on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, so keep an eye out for that. We're going to try and launch on Tuesday. That way there can be an entire day before the live stream. That's the plan anyway. We got questions popping in already. Thank you, Dean and the Ruckus. And oh, hey, everybody. Everybody's saying hello. How is it going? Yep. If you're on YouTube, you can't post links, but you can always type out a question. I do like those. Although, yeah, Khan, if you're asking about something specific, I don't specifically know that, so it might be good for you to go on Twitch and post a link because it sounds like a specific reference. These questions are starting to come in. D official is saying, can I confirm if the new placement tools, scatter and dynamic place, don't work with a take system? I unfortunately can't confirm or deny that. I don't know. I don't use the take system pretty much ever. It's just I don't have a need for it, so I haven't really used it. So sorry, I wish I could give you more specifics, but that would be something good to know. But we already have a question in quickly from Dean. I don't think there's much more to tackle or talk about, so why don't we start doing questions? Make sure if you put a link to a video or something, call out the very specific effect. I want to know the time code or the effect that you want, and I need to see the artist or studio who made it. But besides that, let's dive on in. So I'm going to switch to the proper screen, click on this link, mute the tab, and check out what we've got. Well, is this an animation? It looks like a still. Yeah, it's a painting. So this is Strike Art saying a painting by Jason Anderson, and it's really cool looking. I really dig it. So it's a sunset on a city on the water, but I really love the way it's abstracted. Now I understand the idea behind the question, but there's a lot of artistic decisions happening here. So it's going to be difficult to automate this at all. Having said that, we don't necessarily have to automate it. We could still use Cinema and do something kind of cool that might emulate it. And I do love these real world links, so thank you for that. Okay. The very first thing that we're going to need is some sort of image. I'm trying to think if I have anything handy. Give me one moment. Scrolling through maybe some recent things I've made. I just need some sort of still. I'm going to go to the mesh to spline renders and see if any of those might look like something. We need something that has actually the I just need a still image. I'm going to go into the Ricochet, because Ricochet had more like landscape type things, and yeah, maybe the laser scan, because I don't think I did any kind of, yeah, so I might pull this up. This is an animation that I made. Oh, not that one, this one. Yeah, this will be a fine thing to work from, but we're not going to use an animation, but I was just showing it. So it's a animation made for the Ricochet plugin launch. But in any case, I will open up the laser scan Mars, and here's all the still images from it, and I'll just find one that's particularly bright. Okay, cool. So let's save a scene file immediately. Give me a moment, because I want to make sure that's saving the correct folder. Scene files, number 1. Pixelate-ish. Okay. Now that that's done, I'm going to just copy. I'm going to copy this image into our current scene file by going into the scene files, make a texture folder, call it TEX for texture, paste it in. Excellent. Okay, now let's see. Let's see indeed. Creating a plane object. I know that this image is 16 by 9. And actually, we'll start out with a couple of subdivisions so you can see what my plan is here. So you can see that I've got it subdivided in a nice even way. Let's bring that image in. We might not need to bring it as an image. So here's the thought. I'm going to explode this out into all of its individual pieces. This isn't going to be the way we do it in the end, but let's try and parametrically break this apart. What would be the best way to do that? Here's the simplest thing I can think of. We'll make the explosion effect, and I'll increase that a little bit, but let's just do like 1%. And I will say speed of 0, angle of 0, and you see that they all get separated out a little bit, and no randomness. And yeah, and we could set that to something real small, like 0.001. So now they're ever so barely exploded apart from each other, disconnected, meaning we can throw this into a fracture object, or I do like using the MoGraph Voronoi fracture, which is going to break it apart. You see how all of these have gotten colorized? So if we say sources delete, it's now exploded each of those into their own MoGraph object. Okay, so having done that, we can feed this an effector. So that will get I think we can do a plane effector. I don't want to affect the position, but we are going to affect the color, which is based on the field color. So in the fall off, I can create a shader field. The shader field will affect the color. I'll turn that on. But I think the Voronoi fracture overrides the color until we say don't colorize the fragments. So hopefully this is now returning a color. And that should now, let that load. Let's go into our current file. Track down that image. Yes, excellent. So you can see now every single one of our individual boxes is getting this shader field applied, and you can see how the image is being drawn on there. It's pretty pixelated. Now I did this way because now we can say double that and double that, and now you can see that this is fully colorizing each one of our polygons based on the average color of what came beneath. It might not be average color, it might be like the middle pixel or something, I'm not sure. But we could keep on increasing or decreasing that. Now obviously we could have done this with a posterize effect, or in Photoshop you could do it in a trivial way. But this is just showing the concept, okay? Now, hopefully it shows up, but I do want to make a material, and let's make that material have a luminance channel, because I just want to see this fully. And in the luminance channel, feed it a MoGraph, yeah, I think color shader. Yeah, excellent. So now instead of this, you see there's not a specular like messing up our screen. In addition to that, we currently have the shader field feeding this image directly, but instead I will copy that image. Let's just copy that shader and instead make another material. And in the luminance channel of this material, I will paste that in. So now that image is here, meaning I could apply that image directly onto the plane and then say the shader field should reference the luminance channel of that material. Now you're going to see it's not showing up here. We're actually just seeing the final image, and that's because this material is getting applied, which is overriding anything MoGraph might do. But if I tell this selection not to show up by typing in any letter, then now it's like, oh, well, now there is no material applied to it, but it still can extract that projection from it. So the hope is that we can modify this plane to generate our final geometry for us. But while we have the fracture turned off, I'm hoping we can see it. I guess we'll have to turn this on and off. But now we can see that actual image projected on there. We've got the, I'm going to set it to, I guess it is a proper projection. It's not the best high contrast image we could have put on there, but that's what I got. Okay. Based on this idea, why don't we lower our count all the way down to 1, 1. And now pretty much we're going to do this effect just using the knife tool. Now there's a chance we'd want to come back to this step, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to use my plugin Recall. but I don't think we're really going to need it. It's just saving a duplicate in case we need to go back to this step. So making that editable, it just goes to using the knife tool now. So hitting K, that opens up the knife tool, and now we can begin making cuts. Now, we could make them very linear. Let's turn on Q, NB, yeah, NB and NQ. Turn on material and turn on seeing the polygon so we can draw from the top now. If we wanted, we could do this via like purely vertical and horizontal cuts by just holding down shift. So I could say do a cut there and a cut there, and we could just make very specific cuts. So essentially what we're doing is bringing the artistic level of this back again by, by that we have this step that we have to do. So we can just make any cuts that we think are super relevant. So this isn't going to be much, but just to show you, let's just say that that is the rover. So we're obviously not very detailed right now, but the hope is if I just click on object mode and tell this material to not show up, then now instantly it turns into the pixelated version of this. Every cut is now representing the average pixel from below it. So it's as simple as just changing this letter. I can't immediately think of a way of stopping needing that. I guess we could just have it on a different object and be displaying it, but do you see the concept now? I mean, it's pretty straightforward now that I've done it. So, not automatic, and everything that would be automatic would be creating random shapes. Like a Voronoi fracture by itself could create a bunch of shapes. Let's just add in a distribution source and add in, a bunch of cuts. And you see we're getting all these random cuts. And now we've done that, as long as I, once again, turn off this material, we're going to get a pixelated version of that. So the cuts we put in and those are going. So we kind of get the stained glass window effect. We've done similar things. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to undo a bunch of times, and let's just go back to this original shape and see what, let's try and actually make it look like something. So, and I don't know what I'll end up with, but yeah, let's do a single vertical cut right there. But I'm going to go ahead and allow myself to use some diagonals. So I'll even, like I said, I'm going to take some artistic liberty here. We'll do a cut like that. Shoot that one out. So I'm just going to have some fun with the placement of these cuts. And let's see. Go one for the mast. Yeah, holding on shift goes a long way here. What do I want? Let's do a diagonal, another diagonal, get a cut on the wheel, another cut on the wheel. Go put a giant diagonal there. I'm just letting any given line guide the direction. I'm letting the rest of it go. And even here, that could be fun. Let's zoom up. If you need more detail, obviously you can zoom up. You can overshoot the line. That's forgiving along those lines. Boop. And so you do need a line to complete. Well, that's not necessarily true. I might be able to do something like that. I don't know how well MoGraph will handle that, but I think it will. So you can see I'm just having some fun putting some extra details in wherever I think that they might look nice. And even here, like, I think it'd be pretty cool to just give ourselves some extra slices. Anywhere you want there to be emphasis, we can give it more color variety. So these lines will hopefully pull a lot of attention. That's the idea anyway. And then something I had been thinking would be nice is if we just do some random chops here so that some of these highlights might show up. Also, something I should have done earlier is in this material, we can say viewport, texture size, and I'm going to say default or no scaling. And now you see you get the super high res image popping up there. So really what I want here is just some random cuts. kind of messed that one up. ME, actually using not the knife. Oh, okay. Don't want to do that. I'm going to hit undo. This is still UV mapped, not frontal projection. Maybe it would be good to do frontal projection, but if I move any points, it's going to change the UV layout. If we change it to flat, that would get around it, but anyway, I'm not going to do too many more, just a couple extra cuts. Actually, I'm now in polygon pen, so keep that in mind. But polygon pen is going to work just as well as the knife tool, maybe even better, honestly. But yeah, just putting extra detail anywhere you think that you'd want it. And, and it goes to, it might be a good idea to, this highlights is not helping, but when I move the camera, I can see it. So you could trace out a couple of key rocks if you want them to have emphasis and whatnot. No, that one didn't work. But, we could put a bunch of extra details on any of our main lines here. Like there's obviously an intentional giant, oh, okay, I see. The knife, I'm treating it like the knife tool, but you have to click on an edge to get it to acknowledge. That's what I was messing up there. So I've got a couple intentional kind of vanishing point lines I built in when I was making this. So, a couple of shapes to go along those might be nice. But anyway, I'm just having fun here. Making random cuts. We got like that big rock right there. Ooh, interesting. I was trying to dissolve that away, but didn't seem to like that. That's fine. I'll just leave it like that. Boop. And oop, it's not liking that. I'm going back to the knife tool. Yeah, it was making some cuts there that I don't think will break anything, but yeah, I don't like this shape. It's not behaving the way I expect it to, so I'm going to undo until I get the knife back. I do like the, I love automating things, but there's a certain point where it's like, okay, you make a rig, and the rig is capable of doing certain things, and in this case, the rig is capable of, automatically taking any lines that we trace and converting them into some cool shapes. So, now we've got this very artistic process of making, every time I make a cut, every time I click to make a point, a decision is being made, and, hopefully, the decisions you're making are not random. You're following some set of rules, or you want to emphasize something in particular. So based on that, your series of this, every time you make it, to me, every time you're making another decision, you're like making it a more artistic endeavor. Every decision that you make is making this more about something you did. Okay, anyway, that's as far as I'm probably going to go on this one. That should be the concept. So once again, simple as telling that not to acknowledge, and then we get this final image, which is all weird and abstracted, but the more cuts, the more subdivisions, everything that we do would be adding more and more detail. We've got all these base guidelines on there, and I do like that. They're probably, we could put 10 times as many cuts, but you can start seeing how you get an abstract shape going. As I said, even with these guiding lines, we could add a subdivision surface, or I'm sorry, in the Voronoi fracture, we can add a source, and that's adding random cuts, but that will add additional detail. But our original lines are going to, those already pre-existed, so those lines will still be there, emphasizing those directions. So we could keep on adding more random points, but you still see that there's still definitely an emphasis of these lines going, so it still catches your eye, and as I increase it, you get more detail. Now, an image that had more contrast, an image that had, like a sunset is a really good idea, because you get that bright point in the middle and it'll fade out towards the edge. All these rocks are very uniform, so not necessarily the best starting point we put here. But yeah, the ability to keep on cranking this up, add more detail, see the image slowly pop out from the overall shape, and create it via cuts. These individual pieces, we could scale the cells and let those stretch, maybe not on Y. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we can stretch those cells and get something a little bit more directional if you wanted to. But yeah, that's the idea for getting the basic shape. I'm trying to think of it if there's any reason to go a little bit further and try and make, if you want that paint look, because it's really cool, but all this extra paint looks like these are things that could be done. A lot of it would, probably go to, converting this to edges on some form would enable you to be able to trace and highlight these. I think that actually might be kind of fun. Actually, now that I think about it, it's an excuse to show mesh to spline, which I think will work really well on this rig. So, okay, what's the idea here? The colors would be, you still have to extract the colors, so we probably have to reproject this on again, possibly. But the thought is, okay, if you don't have, I'm going to show you, if you don't have Mesh to Spline, which is a plugin that we make over here, you could always temporarily drop this into something like a connect, make that editable, select the resulting geometry, select all your edges, and search for edge to spline. So by doing that, now I've got a spline, and I could even copy that, hit undo a bunch of times, and then paste it, and now you have that spline to do things with. But as an alternative, I should be able to, I still need the connect, so I will put that into a connect. It doesn't need to weld, but I will feed that into a extensions mesh to spline and say that that should be in object mode, and the object will be that connect. And I want to erase the n-gon, so now that should just be returning those lines. So if I hide the original, you can see I've now got a parametric version of that shape. So if I wanted to, I could always go back and do additional cuts, and ours will automatically update. So I could do another cut right there, and I see that updated, but also our, oop, we got to turn on the connect. Now you see that edge automatically updated. So it's just doing that for us. And then the idea here would just be something like, I guess, you know, if I was doing Redshift, let's do a Redshift render view. And these aren't really prepped for Redshift. Let's see what's returning right now. Just the plane. It does say it should get textures, but it seems to be eating. This connect is eating those textures. So I wonder if there's a way around this. Hierarchy-wise, I'm just not sure. But if I'd made, this is dangerous, but if I make an instance of that, put that instance into the connect, and then don't render that, then we get our original colors, but I don't know if the spline, yeah, there still is a spline, so that seems to work. So with Redshift, if we add in a Redshift object tag and turn on whatever, let's do something physical, so we'll do cylinders, then those cylinders should be rendering, and I see we get those lines automatically outlining it. Nope. Let's go to the 3D view, and now if we zoom up, we can get these individual lines, and I'm going to exaggerate it, but let's go up to like 5, and you get these really big, fat, thick lines. And we have the ability to, you know, scale or randomize them this way if we want to have variations in those lines. And now, having those lines, we could start applying some sort of paint material overall, or taking on the projection of this. So if I say a flat projection of that original image, go to the top view, check out our object. You might be able to, maybe I'm gonna put that onto this and say fit to object. No. Ooh, okay. Let's do the connect version. Fit to object. Yes. Okay, yeah, that scaled it really well, and now I hopefully can steal it onto the spline, but I don't know. It also might be upside down. It's probably upside down. Could also be backwards, who knows. Trying to get those colors to line up, but what's the best way to see this? Let's make, yeah, okay. That should be the correct one. Should be. But I gotta say, those don't seem like they're taking on the color very well. But maybe there's just more. No, there's definitely no blue over there. I'm not sure about this flat projection onto Redshift, especially since this isn't a Redshift material. It's just taking on the cinema. But I would have thought that that would work. Yep, back to 3D view. Yeah, see, it's really projected quite strangely. Maybe it's because it's cylinders. I'm going to try changing that to hair strands. Yeah, actually, that does seem better. Maybe the cylinders get some sort of UV thing applied. Who knows what's going on under the hood there. But yeah, there's a lot more detail on those lines. So we could always blur that image. But if we want to take this actual painting, which is what I'd actually want, we would have to render that out or capture that image and reproject it on again, which I don't want to do. If we were staying in vanilla cinema and not Redshift, which is possible, we haven't really done much in the way of Redshift. For instance, this Mesh 2 spline could be fed into a sweep, which can now be fed in inside, T for scale. Go real small on that, and then we'll project that down on the sweep. And we could, actually, it's kind of nice to do it this way because you could do really, really small, like super micro 0.1, and then you could do displacement on it to get random thickness, which would actually be really cool. So let's try that actually. We need to subdivide these lines. We have an upcoming tool. I could give you a sneak preview of something, one of the things the new tools do, but it definitely won't be available quite yet. It's not launched yet. And this is not the tool that's launching Tuesday. But we could just turn on subdivided, which is probably, yeah, let's just turn on subdivided. That's good enough. So I'll say linear, but I want it to be subdivided and linear, I said. And now every 5 units, it should be creating a subdivision. It's a little bit hard to visually tell, so let's crank that back up a bit. Yeah, now you can see there's a subdivision every once in a while. And now that we have a subdivision every once in a while, in fact, let's leave it bigger so we can see it. Based on that, we could put that into a null. Inside that, feed a MoGraph plane effector. Tell that it is a point deformer. And now everything's going to inflate all super crazy. I think we want to push it out on Z. Yeah, so now you see they all inflate. And based on that, I could feed in a random field. So this is randomly doing it. But of course, you could and probably should have it determined by something, maybe even the image underneath, or maybe, I don't know, some way of doing a point of contrast. But this random field, we can turn on some remapping, turn on a curve, and then we could really pull this down so, you know, the lines get thinner overall, but then we could say, but also they can get bigger. And take that baseline, which has that thickness now, and say that should be really small, so 0.01. So the baseline gets really thin, and now all of these kind of these like paint drips are the only things that actually pop out. So now, based on that contrast, we could go into the random field, remap it, and based on that, determine how thick the line should be, like very specifically. Get a lot of control over that. And different noises, obviously, will have very different looks. That's a Perlin noise, but something like Luca is probably going to be a lot spikier, and that's probably able to get quite large. Yeah, you get these more consistent lines. But anyway, you can see how you can start layering up and getting some crazy layouts there. And then my thought was, as far as that material being consistent, you can see right now it's all crazy. It's not pixelated in the way we drew out our custom pixels. What we could maybe do, I don't know if this will work. It might create an infinite feedback loop, but we could create a camera material. So let's try in the color channel, create a effect. Is it not an effect? Camera shader. Okay, it's a MoGraph camera shader, and that now requires a camera. So we will make a camera, and that will be the camera. Horizontal scale and vertical scale. I'm not sure if that means by pixels, but let's type in our 16:9 ratio. And if we take our camera and project it perfectly, selecting camera, going to object mode, 0, -90, 0, 0, and now we just need to get our zoom correct. If we did frame this up perfectly, I think it should take that texture and reproject it onto the lines. If we, I don't know if it'll work, but if we apply that now onto the lines, that should override that one. Yeah, look, yeah, that's now brown, brown. Yeah, that's actually taking on the colors pretty well. I'm trying to see anywhere it doesn't. Yeah, these are brown maybe where they shouldn't be. Hard to know. There's extra details, but I think you probably see what I'm getting at. And then there's so many things where we can start taking these lines and making displacement copies of them, getting imperfections layering up. And then I didn't even bother going and trying to track down a oil paint texture or a canvas, like making a canvas material on this would automatically go a really long way. I wonder if there'd be any ways of like blending the colors there. I mean, you could always, like I said, take a screenshot in Photoshop, bring it back in again and have blended the colors or even swirled them a bit. Adding on extra layers of imperfection, I think would go a long way here. Even remapping the noise. I could spend a lot of time just having fun, like changing the way all of this is laid out. But yeah, I wish we started with a better base image, but yeah, that's a lot of what I wanted to talk about in it. Type Ogre asking, could you make this effect over a moving render? I mean, you could have an animated background, but because we custom drew all these lines, you would need a different mesh every time you wanted it to frame update, or it'd have to be random. And of course, the random is not difficult, as you see here, as we've talked about. We could add in a random distribution source, and we have all these random cuts, which add in additional detail. So I guess, yeah, just for fun, I will pull in one of those animations. So we can go to, give me a moment. I gotta go track down that animation. Yeah, that'll show up a lot more. So here's that, this one might just have more contrast. So here's the mouse with these are all individual splines from Ricochet. But, you know, there's a lot more visual contrast. We probably should have used this as our base image. So I will, how big is that file? It's not too big. I'm going to copy that. Copy into our current project. Paste. Okay, so I'm going to super simplify. We don't need all those extra lines. We don't need the copy, but we do need the fracture. And this plane is actually going to go back to what it used to be, which means I can't double click recall and bring it back to the original plane. Okay, so saving, well, let's just, what do we need? We don't need too much. Let's go and replace this with the video. So here's that mouse video. And yep, updates immediately. This is a video, so under animation, it's already timed out and it goes up to frame 140. So we'll do that, why not? 24 frames a second. Let's just match this at the 24 frames a second. Okay, so if this material gets turned off, then now you... should that be working yet or not? Maybe recalling that broke the link. Yeah, let's just relink the tag. Boop. Okay, now if I hit X on it, there. Now you can see the pixels. So if you did want this animated, let's just add enough distribution or enough points here to start seeing a little bit of what might be under there. I mean, the more detail we put, the slower it's going to go, obviously. But yeah, there's something. And I would like this to be super random. So at the time of 0, I will record the seed, and at the end, I'll record it with like a much larger seed, so it's like super crazy random. So if I go even 1 frame forward, it's a completely different layout. And we now have a video playing underneath, which is getting referenced. So now there's, you know, just 2 keyframes. And if we save this, sorry, I'm working on some of the plugin stuff, so I have to pull things off the screen. Okay, so now we're saving into the episode 28 render. Create a new folder. Let's just name this 1A mouse pixels. This would probably render faster actually if we set it up as Redshift, but let's leave it vanilla. If I hit render right now, yeah, so, you know, it should render out pretty quick, and you see we've got all of those. So really nothing fancy whatsoever. We could, you know, shrink those down if you want to. If you want space in between them, it's really easy to say offset fragments, I think. So if we say 1, yeah, then you get a bit of a gap there. So if you did want to emphasize the spacing in between them, which looks kind of neat, so I'll leave that on, you can do that. Okay, so let's, is that our safe frame? Yeah, there's our safe frame, so that should be pretty much framed up perfectly. Let's just send it out to the picture viewer, Command, Control, come on. There it is. And save output all frames. And 1920 by 1080. Lock divided by 2. That should be all we need. So let's see what that looks like. It should render pretty quick. So now there's an animation playing and then totally randomized pixels. And I'm just curious. It's really abstract in the beginning, so I expect it to be messy. But after we start zooming out to the point where you can see the mouse, I'm just curious, you know, how much control we have over this. Keep in mind, actually, yeah, I think you can see it pretty well. Obviously, this is the type of effect you could probably do in After Effects, but there's a lot we could layer up on top of this. Like those could be like stained glass panels there that we actually extrude and have them have some thickness and some refraction and a little bit of bump on it, so they become like a proper stained glass window. And you see how quickly we just modified this. And yeah, I feel like, especially as we go over the course of frames, you can definitely see the underlying animation and the colors are coming through. Like I said, the higher contrast was going to go a long way with just more colors and areas of light and dark, which the Mars image was uniquely bad at. And yeah, even on Vanilla Cinema, this is running crazy fast. Obviously, trivially easy to add extra resolution on this. Just increase the number of points on the Voronoi fracture and you would get a lot more points, which would in turn give you more just overall resolution. That could even be something you added variation in. And you could have patterns and whatnot here if you ran something like a matrix through it, and those could be very specifically placed based on some criteria. I'm not sure what criteria, but some criteria. And done. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's pretty trippy, but it works. I'm curious, I don't know specifically how each one of those cells samples below, if it averages it or if it just picks a random pixel. I don't know. Trying to think of what, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to specifically layer. Like I said, there's a lot of ideas, like I had just said out loud, the turning this into a proper stained glass or something. You could change the distribution of the detail. Even here on the random one, right now it's uniform, but we could do like an exponential. And now you see there's a lot more detail on the left instead of the right. Normal? Yeah, normal is from the center out. So we could have the center be a lot more detailed and the outside gets a little bit more abstracted. And, you know, increase the count there. Yeah, so you can start getting really, really subdivided. I'm not going to let the whole thing render. Let's do a smaller gap in between. And let's start from frame 55. But same idea, a little more detail, and this time it's in the center. And yeah, immediately you can see how much more detail we get here. But yeah, that's kind of funny. Like you can see how it like falls off on his foot and suddenly these big giant chunks. But yeah, a little extra detail there. So, you know, pretty fun, and we have a lot of control over it. Even that, or there's ways you could add animation in. Imagine this was a giant matrix setup, and you could have them kind of be raining. Somebody just said the word rainy, and I'm not sure what you mean specifically, but that makes me think we could have these trickle downward in a way that could be cool. So while that's rendering, let me tell you what I'm thinking here. Let us delete. I'll save this. See. pixel mouse. I'll just say pixel mouse. Okay, and then delete that point source. It's going to be significantly less chunks here because we don't want it to take too long. Now, I want to make, I guess, an infinite animation that I don't have to worry about a loop point. So I will make a straight line with no subdivisions, and bigger. Okay, so you can see I've now got a helix to be treated as a straight line, and I want to overshoot it a bunch on the top, so it's overshooting the top, overshooting the bottom. And the reason for that is creating this matrix I can clone onto the helix, and now you see I've got a bunch of those, and we're going to want like a lot of those, so I'll do 1,000, and then we can randomize them. MoGraph, MoGraph menu, random. Now we could put random in all directions. That's fine, you could. But the only one that's particularly useful for us right now is X. So let's say 0, 0. And now we're just putting randomness on the X. And if we say 1600, yeah, that's double. So let's cut that in half. Now you see that they are spreading out over the full width of this. And because we cloned onto a helix, I could say, okay, matrix, I want you to have a rate of whatever, let's say 5. And if I play, yeah, you see now that these are kind of raining downward. So we have complete control over those moving down. We could add additional effects and have those be animated, like slowly drifting one side to the other. I'm going to speed it up so they go a little bit faster. And why don't we do that? I will, that random is doing something very specific. So I'll add a second random. And this random can be noise-based, individual indexed. So now they're individually calculated. And it's based on a global noise. That could be fine. It's the scale. The scale should be pretty big. Yeah, if I make the scale bigger, it's going to calm those down. And now we can slow the speed down and just get them drifting around a little bit. So having done that, let's see, this animation finished. Let's take a peek before we move on. Oh, freaky. That's cool, though. I like this fall off on the outside. It's kind of a trippy effect. Wow. That would probably look better at a slower frame rate. I'm going to drop it to 15. Yeah, now it's like some sort of weird flashback of some weird robot memory or something. It's cool, though. Anyway, that's happening now. So in the Voronoi fracture, that can be fed a custom source, and that source will be the matrix we made. And the instant we do, you can see that the mouse is reappearing. I'm going to undo view until it comes back. So now you can see that these are now based exactly on that mouse. We can control the count, which was running pretty quick. So I'll jump this back to 55555, get 5,000 of them going. And because they're kind of trickling down, I'd like some verticalness to them. So that means let's scale the cell up on Z, I think. So let's go 2. And now you can see, yeah, they stretch. We can stretch that to whatever degree we want. Let's see how that looks. Hide the matrix. Freaky. Did it stretch the image to do that? That would be weird. Well, maybe not. Yeah, it's just the way the mouse is here. But anyway, let's leave it at 5 there. Let these go down. They'll be slowly drifting so we can see. I'm going to push that too far just to see how it looks. That's interesting. Fragment offset, we'll go real small, like 0.1. It seems like the offset fragments also scale, which is, I wish they didn't scale that way, but that's fine. But yeah, let's not scale that much. 5 was fine. And again, the matrices are pretty quick to calculate. I'm gonna make it 3 times as many just to get some more detail. And yeah, we could even have these have less fall off near the edges if we were so inclined. And one last thing, in the rate, we can add some rate variation. So I'm gonna add 25% rate variation on that too. So let's send that to the picture viewer. I don't want to override. Let's make it a different version. Save. B. Render. Yeah, and but anyway, let's move on to a different question. Because yeah, we've already explored this one pretty far. But yeah, there's cool things we can do by converting each clone into a pixel, essentially. I don't know how cool, because the camera on the background is moving as well, because we kind of got two motions happening. I'm curious how well the vertical travel of those is going to translate. Do do do. Demorthus, welcome as a first-time viewer, and these get reposted. If you're on Patreon, I repost them pretty quickly, and otherwise they're on the Rocket Lasso archive channel, and they're all there forever, so no worries. Let's see. Yeah, apparently there's a Max on stream going right now too. Yeah, they do the third Wednesday of every month. But I've been live streaming on Wednesdays for like 5 years, 6 years or something. So I think I got the schedule. Hey Shane, how's it going? Long time no see. What if you use the image itself as a distribution source? Is that a thing? I've never used, but now that you mention it, yeah, you can add a shader source, which is not something I've ever done. This seems like a good opportunity to do so. Let's see what happens. I'll save this as another version just in case. What does a shader source mean? So delete the matrix, add a shader source, and what does that do? It wants a shader. I'm going to say I want to look at the luminance channel of that. And now the sample mode is based on the volume or the surface. I'm also not getting terribly good feedback. Surface, okay, surface did something. Point amount, let's do 1,000. So what is that doing? I'm not seeing anything specific. Sample precision, I'm going to try increasing that, assuming that makes it more specific. Sample depth, create points per object based on alpha. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what this is doing. In theory, it's based somewhat on the image, and my assumption would be areas of particular contrast will get more points. It's interesting, but it's very close to random. But this image is decently detailed, so I wonder if that's part of like a problem with being able to see the shader. But I've actually never used that shader distribution, so it does make for an interesting question. I will try loading that Mars image because it does have less contrast, and that should just filter through the entire system with any luck. Again, I'm not seeing too much difference in the point precision, or in the where they're distributed. Now it's possible the sample precision is more detailed if we decrease the amount. Well, that's interesting. Bizarre. Very particular pattern. I don't dislike it. Sample precision 1. Okay, obviously 1 is less detailed. 150 is the max. Sample depth, I don't even know what that means. Doesn't do anything. Or it froze. Okay, sample depth seems to have made it upset. We'll see if that wakes up. I don't even know I was clicking. So. Space Noodle, you're not seriously asking that question. You better be ironically asking, because we are not going to encourage any piracy here. How do we kill that? Yep, sorry. You get timed out. Yeah, sorry, no money. No money is not a good excuse for piracy. They, and it goes to like if you're going to do certain things in your own time and whatnot, but you don't go on the internet and advertise that you're doing this. Like you've got a reputation to maintain. So this seems to have totally frozen up Cinema. So I am going to kill it. I don't even know what that parameter is I cranked up, but Cinema is not liking it. Yeah, it's not acknowledging, unfortunately. So end the task. But I just saved, so we didn't really lose anything except for putting that shader in. It's reloading. Okay, so maybe it got grayscale. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, that's interesting. I would like to explore that more in the future because it seems like something good, or at least I should read up on it. Yeah, I'm assuming that's based on brightness or the different brightness as it finds different pixels. I'm not sure. What would your method be to create this effect from Mick? Let's see what we got here. Mute. So we've got, is this off? It's hard to tell. YouTube spinning. Yeah, it's off. I'm going to do a speed test, make sure. Fast.com. How we doing? Well, it says we got fine internet going, so this is just hiccuping. Go. Odd. I'm assuming this is the moment that you had. I did mute this, and we gotta keep it small. YouTube's a freaking ninja on canceling things. So again, did this go to the correct link? Because that looked different. I guess so. Houdini is often referencing somebody. So this is actually Panoply's project. So I would prefer that we get a link to Panoply. But what we have right there is just a volume build. Pretty straightforward volume build. I'm trying to see, is repeating. But I mean, if you're just looking at this kind of build on growth, which is cool, it's neat looking. Let me see if we can find Panoply Heredura. Yeah. So it'd be better to, yeah, Simon. This is from Simon. So yeah, this is why we need to, you track down the specific artist and not necessarily those compilation places, because we want to see, or I'm not sure if it's in there or not, but always try and track down, like, yeah, right there, you see that's the final animation. But always track down the original source and not something that's referencing the source. But still, it's a good link. Okay, so yeah, building on the stuff. Simple volume. You could even see from that behind the scenes that there was a lot of like reduction of poly counts. Now, presumably that was being done in Houdini, but if you do have a shape, then we can feed that into a volume. And just to show you, we can put that into a volume builder, put that into a volume mesher, and then we can go to our poly count. And this is obviously not super high poly. Let's crank that up a bit. So now it's pretty dang high poly. But most of this detail is pretty redundant. But inside of your volume mesher, you can increase your adaptive. And as you increase that, you see our poly count, even just 1.1% here, is enough to say reduce, 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 and now all these redundant ones that don't do much just go away. So we'll keep that in mind as we go. And while testing, we'll keep this semi-reasonable. So what I'm thinking is we just need to start feeding in some fields here. Maybe we can do a group field. So I'll say group field, and in the group field, it'll get a linear set to, it's always the opposite of what I think, so I'm going to say y minus, and then also create a random field, and that will multiply on top of it. We don't need color. Okay, that's the idea. So in the volume builder, can we drag this group field And okay, volume. So we get the group field, and then we say that the group field should exist anywhere, not based on this box, but based on the objects below. And as soon as we do, you can see we get this crazy blobby shape happening down there. Good so far. Now I'm going to say I want to see where, well, it's the union of the two. So let's say subtract. So it's subtracting on the outside. It's not as much of a volume as I thought it would be. Let's try turning off that random and just see the linear. And the linear just seems to shrink it a bit. I would have thought that that would fully erase it. Let's try changing the linear to a box field. And even the box field, subtract, intersect. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be really be generating anything. Interesting. Now, it's possible that just the random will do more what I want. So let's say random, normal. So it's not even seeing that. So now we got all this randomness. I would have thought that this would be randomness in the entire volume, but it seems to only be on the outer skin. Is it possible? Oh, there's a threshold surface. Is that how far? It's interesting. I thought it was the entire volume. Let's get rid of the group field. Hang on, before I do that, let's pull out the random field. Delete the group field. Okay, random field. And if we say, hey, just generate, yeah, right now it's generating as a box. You see it's actually creating the volume like I wanted it to, and this has nothing to do with this surface. Well, I mean, the surface obviously does something, but that's more what I wanted. Now, can that random field combine with a linear? If I put a linear field in there, yeah, see, that's what I wanted. Maybe something about the group field made it not work. So if we say a linear, temporarily turn off random, turn on linear. It is currently set to the box, but that's fine. Linear field y minus. Oh, seems like y plus, of course. So now, right as it hits that halfway point, it's going to do that transition. But what I really wanted was those two to combine in some way. So we don't want to just intersect. I wanted to get that overlay, which implies, Ignacio, you might be right. It might be the type. We might need this to be in fog mode. Yeah, so if we take the I think it goes vertically. So we take the random and we subtract. Yeah, there we go. We subtract the random from it. So now if we make the cube, but the cube needs to be a volume as well. And you see it's not even being acknowledged. The fog is not seeing that, so that's volume based, which is interesting. We're okay. By changing this mode, we're definitely, well, putting both the fields in and changing this mode puts me in an area where I don't have an super expertise here. That's not to say that we can't make some interesting things happen, but I'm not going to instantly have a direction for us to go in. So a thought being, instead of using the cube, we'll use a box field, because a box field might be able to be acknowledged, yeah, as a volume. So box field set to normal, and this is currently set to box and not the object below, which means, yeah, we can, well, that's scaling it. Coordinates, position, I guess scaling it. What's determining the box? I'm not sure what the limiter is here. Because that stops once I drag it up to a certain height. Oh, but maybe that stops because this stops. So essentially we just make this be very big. So let's try going 500 by 500, which is overkill. But if we say 500 by 500, then now we got a pretty big box that this box is now represented in. Now that we've done that, we can turn back on our random field and turn that on, which is set to normal. But we can start, I suppose, subtracting. But can we make a folder? So I want to put a linear field in the folder and a random. So the linear field will be normal. The random field will subtract from it. Is it the opposite? Oh, and these are also, those are also set to the same limiting box, so we have to grab both of those. Oh, and we can't grab both. Let's say objects below. Also objects below. We need the box field to be able to even see it. That is subtracting based on a random. Oh man, so many combinations. I just don't have these variables in my head very well. That should subtract. Oh, I should probably turn on the linear field. But even that doesn't seem to subtract enough. Whoa. That's subtracting? Oh, this is turning into pure madness. Yeah, Dean, that's what I was thinking. But these don't have... There's no such thing as a mask when it comes to these. There is no mask. So you have to do things like multiply. But those aren't behaving the way I expect them to. I'm not saying that they're wrong. It's just not what I'm expecting. And they're not interacting with the objects below them in the way I expect them to either. There's going to be a combination of these that does do what we want. Because right now you can see if I pull this down, then we're kind of getting the opposite effect, where we can actually see this cloud of noise generating the mesh as it passes through. And then it's even got the hole in the middle. So it's all about just the proper order. We got the right ingredients here, but we need them mixed in the right way. And fog is just not something I'm terribly used to. Subtracting. I mean, I want to intersect, but there's no intersect. So if we set that to add, and then that's multiplying. If we say add, nope. We want something subtractive. Multiply, but then we're getting those all over the place. That's closer. So if we flip our field around, we got some of those floaters on the outside, but you can see that we're close to getting those. But yeah, there's no mask. I wonder if a group field would work there, but I'm not sure that a group field would add anything to it. Blur, but it runs nice and quick. And then if this was animated, you can see it's just traveling through, which is cool. Like, it's a purely additive. There's no animation there, but it does fill in very, very nicely. And depending on the scale of your overall noise, you would have obviously different details. There's definitely going to be some floaters inside there, but you know, there you go, more detail as that would go upward. So you get your final shape. Yeah. Trying to think if there'd be yeah, Mick, just turn it upside down. Yeah, there's going to be perfect, proper ones. I just don't want to spend a lot of time like guessing, checking here. I should play with fog more in general, just because there are obviously things that you can do with fog mode. It's kind of like, you know, every voxel is being like, okay, how are all these this giant grid of voxels? They're all adding together, and only if they, you know, if they're 0, they don't exist. If they're 1, they do exist, and everything in between is like a transitional state. And we're merely adding those together. So I get the logic of it. We just have to put it together correctly. Yeah, but I'd rather tackle another question. So if anybody has another question, get that posted. Do 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 do. Multi-block, volume, fog. How would you attract soft body dynamics to a black hole and make them disappear? My goodness. What do we have here? That is quite the question. Let's check out the reference. MSI Gaming. Extra WEG Studio was commissioned. So this is Extra Wig Studio to create some looping artworks. Whoa. Cute. Oh, love it. Yeah, that's cute. This is very MoGraphy. Whee! Okay, yeah, that's super nuts, but I see what you're asking. Okay. Let's think. There's definitely a soft body vibe on that. I think soft body is definitely a way you'd have to go. And, well, here's the thing. Well, first of all, that's not necessarily cinema. There's a good chance it's not Cinema 4D because there are very specific parameters. There are very specific parameters that we can animate and can't animate. And one of the parameters that's really cool to animate, let's keep this simple for instructional purposes. Creating a sphere that's set to a triangular layout. When we have a mesh, we can make it soft body. So let's add on some dynamics, simulation soft body, and we let that drop. So, okay, cool, we got soft body. And then we've got a really cool parameter, pretty much the only one we have to affect scale, and that is rest length, which is just scale. So we can shrink things with that. Now, there is a map here, and maybe that's how we can get around this, although this is super dangerous stuff. So immediately we shall save this because we, last week, learned a workaround, maybe using the correction deformer. Shrinking soft body. And of course, you get access to these scene files if you're supporting on Patreon. So that's why I'm saving them and calling them out in the episode as we go. Okay, so rest length. It is just a set number. So if we were to keyframe that and then by the end of the animation we've gone to, let's say, 10%, then over the course of this animation, that is going to shrink, 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 shrink. Of course, that is just a number. It's just a number, and the only thing that can modify that number is this map. The map is a vertex tag. It's a vertex weight map, and you cannot put a vertex weight map on a... Well, I guess we can make this editable. Maybe this is simpler than I thought it would be, because we can make it editable. I was thinking we had to keep it parametric, but we don't have to keep it parametric. So let's select and set a vertex weight. This will be interesting, actually. So we'll set the weight to 100. Actually, we don't have to set it to anything because we're going to override it with fields and make a linear field. Not a child. And set that to y minus. Yeah, y minus. Delete the freeze. Set that to normal. Okay, so now you can see that. Oh, no, it's the opposite. Y plus. So now you can see that it's at full strength right there. So there it's 100%. Down here it's at 0. I want to be careful and never quite go to 0. So we'll set the minimum to 10%. So even if it goes all the way down, it's only going to 10%. So now we shrink that down and move it down, and then move the floor even further down. And now the idea is if we say that the rest length is 100, but then we multiply it by that, in which case it's going to be multiplied by 10% as it passes through here down to 10%. It should be 10% the length, meaning 10% the scale. That's the idea. So nothing to do but to do it. So let's hit play. Oh, it worked. Okay. This is more straightforward than I thought it would be. Because in my head, I thought we had to keep it parametric, but there's no reason to. So now you can see we actually do have this be field driven. So yeah, that's almost like the entire thing. So here's some of the basics. I wonder if it works on multiple, like if we clone that, does more than one work? 500, let's just keep it simple, 2 by 2, 500. Okay, so if we change that linear field again to a box, we can even set it to spherical, honestly. So we'll make it spherical field and give it some fall off. Okay, yeah, we got lots of fall off. So there's the inner. So that is a spherical field. Move that. Let's zero out the floor. 0 out the spherical field. Okay, so that is erasing things out. It'd be better to do a cylinder, but that's fine. Okay, those are soft bodies. They're going to fall and really not do anything. That should be fine. Burp. Okay, and then we need to make them... Actually, before we do, let's just test it. So if I move our spherical field... Yeah, okay, see, it's affecting all of them at the same time. So you can't do it in a cloner. Just because you can't do it in a cloner doesn't... You know, it's not the end of the world, but it does mean you have to make it editable if you do want to clone more than one. But for the most part, it just means you're making one rig and then making more than one at the time of running it. The fields are disappearing on me. Do I have fields? Oh, I do have fields turned off. Okay. Usually I like to hide them, but only when I want to hide them. So anyway, what I was going to say is we can make that and then create a simulation force, field force. That will get a giant spherical field. It will get its own. We'll make it huge. Super huge. Remapping full power. Actually, I'll do 99. And that should pull this. That should be giving that a directional force to either pull it in or push it away. Let's see which one. Okay. Why did that shrink? Oh, that needs to be inverted. Remapping, invert. Okay. So yeah, that is correctly attracting it. In fact, it's already running pretty well. So let's jump that to 999. So as this rolls in, shrinks down to 0. So cute. Okay, now just because I maybe made a mistake there, because I didn't invert it properly. Let's try putting it back into the cloner. 2 by 2 by 700 by 700. And we need to get some variation, actually see them. Huh, okay. In a cloner, it's simply not acknowledging them at all. So, once again, good to know. But if we just make that editable and then hit it, they should all be independent now. And yeah, now they independently can shrink. So you have to make it editable, but they do get shrunk and sucked in. So yeah, that's a scale-based one. Now, this type of use case is exactly why I did make the plugin recall. So just as an FYI, let's say you're doing all this crazy stuff and then you've got your simulation, you want to make it editable because it's not going to run otherwise. We can go and add a recall tag, which is from Rocket Lasso, double click, and now it's made it. That means I can make this editable and let those run, do their thing. And it's like, okay, cool, it's working, but I want that to go quicker, so I'll increase the strength so it pulls in quicker, and we could change, any properties outside of it, and you're like, oh, dang it, but I need to go and change the count, and now, you've made changes to your field force and your spherical field and all these different things. You've changed them all. Well, now I can double click recall and bring that back to where it used to be, and now we can go and make changes, and I didn't lose what happened inside of the spherical field. So anyway, that's literally the type of use case that was designed for, to get around this type of thing. Because once again, we want to be parametric whenever we can be. But anyway, the individual ones are working awesomely. I'm very pleased. I making it editable, just pulling those in is pretty great. Let's make that bigger so we can get a little bit more of a fall off. I wonder. Oh yeah, it's super big now. But I'm curious about some additional details because it's all field stuff now. So we get extra superpowers along with it. So now we get our field, or our sphere, and it rolls in. It's going to slowly shrink as it goes, which is cool. But what happens if we do something like put a spring on this? What happens if we say delay and we make it springy? So I'm gonna go overboard. Like 99, because this is a very slow transition. I'm not sure what will happen. Can't say that it looked like it did much. Let's make the transition quick so we can see if anything happens. Meaning not much fall off. So now we're gonna hit a pretty harsh wall. I'm still not really feeling it. So maybe the spring simply can't spring. but maybe 99 is too much. Who knows? Let's try making it a slightly reasonable number. Oh, yeah, it's doing something. It can't go negative, which is always kind of an issue. But you see how there is a wobble on it. It's very minute. But you see, and then it suddenly goes up and down, up, down. But it can't overshoot negatively because we are clamped, and we don't want to unclamp because you can't go negative values in your vertex map. And we can try clicking unclamp. I don't think it's going to do anything. It might go to 0. Yeah, it's weird. But we are hitting this pretty harsh wall right now. So I'm going to turn the delay off, and let's just look at what it does right now. It's going to transition through this wall, so the front shrinks really fast, and the rest of it goes. So instead of a spring, let's set that to be a smooth and put lots of smoothing in there, and let's just see what that does. So now we hit this really harsh wall, but you see it takes a little while to do that transition, so the entire thing has some time. So at that point, you could make this have like no transition, so it can be boom, hit a wall, but it's still going to smooth them out. So that kind of puts it on a timer instead. So it doesn't care about, all it needs to do is have gone through this trigger, essentially. And then our delay controls how fast it shrinks. So it's kind of nice being able to transition that, not from positional, but time. This is now having time do it. So now that transition is quick, not too quick, but pretty quick. And now we can say, no, take longer. And it takes longer. Or you can go like crazy long. And that's going to take a big chunk of time to slowly transition. So yeah, some nice additional features you get by tinkering there. Can you get to stretch? Can you get to stretch? Well, I mean, this is the rest length, so yes. Okay, how do we do this? If we say that the base length is double the current size, then immediately this ball is going to double in size. You see it's going to get bigger, so we can stretch it. It's gotten bigger. But that means baseline, we want it to be only running at 50%. So here's a spherical field, and that's outputting it's going from 0. No, I'm sorry. It's going from 100% to 0 inside of the circle. But really what we want is this outputting 50% on the outside, and that would put it at normal scale. So spherical field here should be a strength of 50% potentially, or we just say a max of 50, I think is better. So now you can see it's already at 50, but that means it shouldn't change size. That is now doing 50% of 200, 50% of double its original scale, which means it doesn't change. But that does give us the option of putting in an additional modifier of some sort. So I will do let's just do a box field. That's simple enough. So we can do a box field here, and it's going to be pulled straight through still. And as long as you put the smoothing there, it's fine. But there's a box field, and that box field can be doing anything. In this case, I will say it is max, so it's kind of adding on top. If it's a bigger number, it's adding on top. And that will go all the way up to 100, and we could do no transition, pretty much no transition there. So that should actually double its size. So when it passes through that box, it wants to go twice as big. So, oop, it's a child of it. Don't be a child. Now let's see. And, oop, didn't seem to trigger max to... Oh, this delay is still turned on. Let's turn off the delay. There we go. You see, just as it's going through that box, it's like bigger, and then it stopped. Now, that's fine. We could add a decay, and the decay is going to be set to maximum. So now, if we give it like 90%, it's going to slowly fade out. So it should get a bigger number, remember it, and then take a while to fade out from it. And eventually, why is that not shrinking down? Why isn't that shrinking? It gets bigger. That's the max. That should have nothing to do with this. Why is the sphere? What did I changed the sphere to be a max of 50%, but it's a min of 10, which means it can go as small as 20. But it looks like it's going. It looks like it's not. It's staying the original size. What did I break there? As soon as it crosses this boundary, it should go from 50% to 10%. That's what we've got here. Everything's turned off. It's kind of behaving like it's the opposite of what I thought it was. Oh, invert is turned on. It's almost like it's the opposite. Oh, we have invert turned on. Yeah. So does that mean it should be a minimum of 50 and a max of 100? That's too big. The invert's going to really mess with my brain. As soon as you invert something, it gets real unintuitive. Because really, let's put that to 5 and put this to 50. Now, that means it's going to be tiny on the outside. And then as it slowly gets dragged inside, let's make it a little bigger. Yep. So now as it rolls, as it transitions here, it's going to get bigger. Which is fine. But if we say the opposite, the max of 50 seems to not work with invert. Invert is expecting a maximum of 100. I think that should be our takeaway. So let's say that that's a inverted min-max, and then feed in a curve. And this can remap it to, let's reset that. To let's say 50%-ish, and a little bit not quite 0-ish. Okay, so that shrinks on the inside now at 50%. Yeah, so that stays the same. Okay, so we had to remap after the fact because it doesn't, the sphere max of 100 is needed to properly make sense of an invert. Okay, so now that that's happening, we can put this box. You see that box makes it get bigger. We can put the delay, which is going to make it remember it being bigger, at least for a little while. And then that will fade out and shrink down. So now we can make it bigger and remember that. And then right here is just the slowdown, which we don't necessarily need. But we can put a bit of smooth in there just to let that transition. So bigger, smaller. Okay, so there we go. We're back to getting control over it. But anyway, yeah, somebody asking if you can stretch, and yeah, that is the stretch. And you could, of course, put noises and everything on top of that as well. Cute. That's very cute. Yeah, it's for the amount of time I've spent learning the specifics of soft bodies and whatnot, I had never thought to do this specifically. I guess abstractly I've done it, but not like this. Anyway, pretty cool. Any soft body setting that could spaghettify it? Not really. Spaghettification, if you mean like the black hole spaghettification, that would be that the tidal forces on the object are so different on one spot that they would literally rip apart like your molecules, because the tidal forces are so different from like your head to your toe. And obviously cinema can't simulate anything like that crazy accurate. But it also goes to like, that's a thought experiment and doesn't really make sense, where it's happening so quickly that it would be, it's like, it happens so quickly it just would look like it's disappearing. So visually that wouldn't really be a thing. And then really all you're talking about in reality would be parts of this object being affected by a field force more or less. And these field forces could probably be driven quite easily via a field. So as a modification, because we've already kind of got this rig here, if this is just a linear field, so you can see, okay, so I've intentionally put this here, so there's a linear field running over the overall shape. That's now got nothing to do with this. Clear that out, put us back to a default scale. And that should hopefully move with it. Yeah, so it's moving with it. Hopefully that keeps the vertex map coherent. Yeah, working surprisingly well. Now, that's getting attracted by this field force. So if I say mask that, and I mask it by this vertex map, then now parts of this are getting pulled and parts of it are not getting pulled, is the idea. Doesn't visually represent it too hard. Let's try making it like that. So now kind of only this tip should be kind of having any forces applied. So you see, yeah, you see it tried to pull it there, but now it's not really tugging on that. So it's like, no, I give up, and it falls over, but that part's still getting tugged. So as we increase the power here, I would expect, well, there's a lot of friction as well. So that friction is saying, no, you got to roll, but this part is still getting pulled. And you see it's going to accelerate. Yeah, watch. So this is working. This is going to fall, and keep in mind that only the yellow is getting pulled. So then it's like pulled, but then friction is saying, well, you got to rotate. So the entire thing goes really slow. But as soon as this goes up and starts accelerating, the entire thing speeds up. So it's going to speed up, slow down, relative to itself, because only part of it's getting tugged. If we get rid of the friction on the floor, then that should just be able to slide, and you'll see that front side is what's getting pulled forward, because, and then it should spin around, because now that wants to pull over there, and then that gets tugged. So yeah, that's the basic idea. And if everything else was like really sluggish, or if we, you know, if we keep on cranking the strength up where it's just that front part is really getting tugged, whee, and whee, and then maybe some friction, maybe. What are some variables we have? I mean, there's not any like real aerodynamic force that's stopping this from doing anything. We could put some drag, which might stop that from going too far. But yeah, there's nothing really lagging that behind. If we started making that be slightly less structural, we can probably make this run really quick too. I'm gonna turn off self collisions just to make sure it doesn't explode, but that really shouldn't have too much effect on anything. And if we start making it less structural, like dropping our flexion and shear way down and get rid of its damping, then those should become, I don't want to get, well, all right, let's pull back on the damping. Surprisingly coherent still. Structural down. Okay, so that's starting to get there. Yeah, you see it right there. Now the front is getting tugged so quickly. But as it stretches this vertex map, the linear field that's driving the vertex map isn't going to move with it. So you see it actually kind of gets left behind, or it modifies other parts. Having said that, we could just, can I just turn off fields? Yeah, now it's just stuck there. That's just, the vertex map is what it is. So even if it stretches, it's going to get pulled. So yeah, conceptually, spaghettification would just be this, but like times a, times a couple billion or trillion or something, where it has to get really big so that, essentially, I mean, it's proper, like, kind of Softbody. Like, you see that's getting pulled, and the rest of it's like, okay, fine, I'm going to follow. But imagine if it got pulled so hard it couldn't follow. I don't even know if that was really your question, but I happen to know a decent amount about the concept of spaghettification, so I could actually tackle that, even if it was an ironic question. I'm going to crank this power up even 10 times stronger, and frame by frame, just so you can see it's going to get yanked, and look how long it's taking for the rest of the model to even realize that this is happening. Now there's like no chance of that crashing, because I made it so that they're not colliding with each other. But yeah, you can see that a whole bunch of the model just doesn't care, but other parts of it are like whee. So more weird cuteness, more weird things to do with soft bodies. Oh, thanks, Paul. Some of these might go from older, or from a little ways back, but let's see. you trigger the attractor really quickly. If you trigger the attractor really quickly, the sphere will stretch, like in the example, with high force. Yeah, even if you just add a little bit of the drag like we did. We added a little bit of drag so all of it's not going, and then really it goes to, we weaken the structural and the shear and the flexion, so that just makes it so that it's very likely to get stretched. Some shape conservation could have been a good idea. The pressure or volume conservation and just a hair of pressure. Might try and keep that a little bit more inflated. Pretty funky. I mean, it's all live too, so I could grab the spherical field and say, "Come over here, come over here," and look how like it's so like quick and responsive trying to get yanked over to that spot. Oh, it's now the spring's all broken. It, you know, that poor area. Pretty cool though. Pretty cool. Yeah, friction on the floor would exaggerate it. Just like I said, putting drag on it exaggerates it. Could you add a field on the outside that turns on and holds the mesh so it doesn't want to go further? Yes. You would do the opposite, actually. If I made a second field force and then we make a second tag, and the second tag does use fields, and then I modify this field to flip 180 and be over here. Yes, no? Name it. You gotta give them different names, very important. Okay, so now that linear field has remapped that over here. And now the field again could be turned off. So now we got a different vertex map doing something different. So a second one could reference a different vertex map and it could live somewhere else. So that one could be over here now. So that, yeah, now has two different goals. So now, whoa, I'm not intentionally telling it to bounce, but it decided it's going to oscillate between the two until it finally explodes. But yeah, so now there's two different attraction points. And so different vertex maps could cause different parts to be pulled in different directions. It's interesting. I'm not sure about the oscillation, why it's happening, but it's interesting. Burp, 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 burp. More friction would, you know, potentially calm it down. And keep in mind, these field forces are up like insanely high. Yeah, so yeah, I think it'd just be like the global drag and friction. Like that one happens to be closer here, so it's kind of tugging on it more. There shouldn't really be a fall off on it, but you know, I'm not necessarily, yeah. That's as much a behavior as any other, but it's still getting tugged between those two. And, you know, again, every single setting inside of its properties here is going to have an effect. If we do zero damping, that should pull out the smoothing and then the shear and flexion. Now you see it stretched instantly a little bit more. The structural is going to be a major component here. So if I weaken that, you'll see it just naturally stretch more. And if we get rid of all the structural, then there would be, you know, it would just completely stretch. But then there'd probably be no coherence between the layers. It definitely explodes, but we are pushing it pretty far. Oh, and you know what? The exploding might be happening because of this volume conservation. It's such an absurd situation to ask it to do volume conservation. It's not necessarily what's causing it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I'm just seeing if it's more coherent. Because the volume conservation probably gets to a point where it's like, nope, I give up, and then it broke. Yeah, see, this doesn't seem to explode anymore. And that's the volume conservation doing it. But yeah, now with this having almost unlimited ability to stretch, you see it almost stretch between them. It's pretty weird, and it's fun. It's weird. Herp. And you know, I could just turn that off, and now that one's not a variable, and this one gets pulled over here. It's kind of weird and slug-like. You know what's even interesting is we still have gravity turned on here too, but they're so, the forces are so strong tugging them in these directions that they're, it's almost as if we don't have gravity. I am going to turn on self collisions again, And I'm going to be careful in frame by frame. I wouldn't be surprised if this breaks really quickly because I'm just ready to turn it off really quick. You see it will run a lot slower because it's now trying to keep that shape going. Turn this on. It's weird. And I mean, and you know, we're running this on essentially the most boring mesh possible. It's just a sphere. If this was a character, then, you know, that could be more fun. Super stretching them. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of behaving like some sort of slime. It's interesting. It's a whole category to think about, of a whole area of exploration I haven't explored a lot, which is cool. A little stiffness goes a long way. Pull both ways. Blurp. Let's say 0 structural. That just means it can fall apart. Yeah, see, now nothing means anything. And everything is completely independent now. Everything just falls. Everything's falling based on gravity. Even 0.1 is probably enough to, yeah. Even 0.1 is like, no, there's some relationship between these pieces. But yeah, there's not even like a volume there. I'm curious if we did feed that into a volume, and I'm not sure it will work because volumes or dynamics don't interact with other systems very well sometimes. Volume builder, volume mesher. Stretch. Yeah, that worked okay. I mean, eventually, I wouldn't be surprised, and it does seem to be happening, where some of these walls will get infinitely thin. They might pass through each other, so even if you were doing this, I'm going to double the structure, which is still not very much, but you know, now we've kind of got this clothy, gooey stretch. The volume builder would probably be a good idea to create a dilate to slightly inflate it. Like even just a little will go a long way, just to make sure that those infinitely thin walls are enough to have some volume. Stretch. Yeah, it's still running pretty well. And you know, we do have the ability with all the stretch that I can just pull the goal to these different areas. You can definitely see the individual polygons having their way, so you probably want a slightly higher polygon object. But it's definitely interesting. Definitely interesting. Blurp. I guess I'll save that. Let's see. Good conversation. That's good. Soren, thank you. What if it loses structural force as it enters a fall off? Mapping the structural, Ignacio, that it's a very similar thing, that these vertex maps could be fed into any one of these parameters to make it weaker. So it could enter a certain area, and once it's in that area, or whatever part of it's in that area, suddenly becomes like really floppy or really stretchy or really stiff. Like we have control over all of those things, which is a lot of power. You could keep on creating more vertex maps and have it do completely different things depending on where it is. It would be fun to, I just don't have a figure prepped, and the volume, we'd have to do volumes particularly, but it would be better to make a figure for doing the weird stuff here. Do I have a figure? Not so much. Well, maybe this has some. Do they have humans? Yeah, I wonder how low poly these are, or how clean. Two-dimensional. This guy looks pretty dramatic. Let's see what he's up to. That's pretty low poly. So I'm going to scale him up a bit just to make it more coherent. Let's see what happens. So let's try. This is a bad idea, but I am going to just steal one of these vertex maps and use fields. I guess it might be, I'm going to copy the guy and open up this one. So that's just when it's getting pulled. And let's put that over here. Steal the soft body as well. And is this the proper setup? No, not quite. It's this one. Blurp, and blurp. Yeah, that's the one we want. So that's what we get there and there. Yep, that's linked in. We got the guy. Okay, first thing we do is just do one frame and make sure it works. Which doesn't seem to be. Well, maybe it is. It's slower than I was expecting. He's not that many polygons. Maybe, you know, it's things like those hands might actually have quite a few polygons. Let's just see what happens. It's running well enough. Here we go. All right, bad things are already happening. His top half is inflating. I wish it was about twice as fast. That would be a reasonable FPS. It doesn't seem to be getting dragged. Maybe there's still some friction. Oh no. Yeah, if this was faster, we could be getting the effects more. Let's see. I think we can make, it's going to be a little bit cruel, but let's go and remove his hands. Because there's a lot of polygons on his hands. And how about his feet? Yeah, that seems alright. But even just getting rid of those hands might have been like half the polygons. Yeah, it's already a lot faster. Oh no, his tiny little head. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's just the technique is transferable to other things. I didn't think there was any friction. No, apparently there is. Zero friction. Whoa. Oh, that's horrific. And he slowly shrinks. Non-uniformly. Oop, he's somewhat escaping, so he's re-inflating. But he can't escape forever. I guess a little friction would go a long way here. Oh, tiny legs. Eh. It's baby legs. But yeah, obviously works really well. Just, you know, I could even just copy it directly from one mesh to the other. But yeah, if we were doing this in cinema, this is the way I would tackle it. There'd be a lot of calculations to make sure that those that many figures were all getting pulled in. I wonder if you could get away with some pretty dang low poly versions and make that transfer. That might be kind of fun to do. How much time we got? About 15 minutes. Is there a T-pose version of any of these? Unfortunately, there's not, but we don't necessarily need them to be T-posed. I'm surprised that they only have these figures non-T-posed. What do we got here? No, he's fully rigged. What's our poly count here? Okay, well, you see this guy has a crazy poly count for considering something like soft bodies. Layers. Let's unlock every layer just in case they're locked. I want, yeah, that's fine. And now we got the character, there's the group, and a skin deformer. Even that can go away. There's a lot of extra details they put on here to make them controllable, but they're just going to slow us down, so I'm going to get rid of pretty much all of them. Cool. Yeah, so we just got the character now. Smaller scales, not necessarily a bad thing. That's real world scale. So we can work from that, but you know, maybe it won't work. Maybe it won't work as well. How well can we fake this really quick with a volume? Probably not very well, but I'm willing to give it a go. So if we, yeah, we need to, if you were going to do this, you'd want to do it right. But if I were doing this properly, you'd want to model it out yourself. So let's grab our polygon pen tool and see what we can do. So if we give him only the edges that we want to, I want everything to be in the ballpark of scale. It'd be good to do a symmetry on them, but maybe that's also a bad idea. I don't know. But you see what I'm doing, where you could start tracing out the character and make the most incredibly low poly version of it. Put, you know, these are all the potential bend points. And the more we make it kind of follow the body, the more accurate the final one would be. We've gone this far, so I'm going to go a little bit further. Man, the polygon pen tool is great. Look at that. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. Because I'm trying to go really low poly, we had that midpoint one. We'd have to double it to put a midpoint and do a symmetry, which we could have done, but I chose not to. So and I do wonder, and that's why I'm putting a little extra effort here, which is in something like that simulation, like there's a lot going in the original animation, and I'm just curious to like how robust the different dynamic system is, or if it was just built in a very clean way, because that's super valid. If you just make a very clean model, which this is relatively clean. Yeah, we definitely couldn't have gotten anything like this from the volume mesher. So you end up with something like that, and then you have to do the additional step of actually making it match the contour of the character. Select all, D for extrude, create caps, yes please, pull backward, mostly capture the character, and select all, UR, invert the normals, D, turn off, create caps, just so I don't forget later. And now I will not spend too long on this, but if we were to just try and match the character a bit more. And dump, pull it forward. Yeah, not the worst. Like obviously you could go and spend an hour tweaking and perfecting and getting a very, very low poly, something very accurate going. Even this neck definitely is not quite detailed enough for what we'd want to do. Definitely not. Because you'd want that neck to have some extra like floppiness in it, which like right now clearly ours doesn't. So it's important to note, like with all the flash of all the pretty stuff people make, and then even like when I'm trying to do these live streams where I'm very intentionally not doing the projects that are like going to take a long time and a lot of calculation and whatnot to do, that at a certain point it's like, oh no, you just have to spend the time and do this type of thing to get things working pretty well. I'm going to call that good enough. Not amazing. If you wanted, you could select all, hit MG for iron and just get like a little bit of overall smoothing going. And then the last one we just need is some boots. So D for extrude. And I'll even put an extra one in there. And maybe select loop. T for scale, a little bit wider. UL. T for scale, a little bit wider. So you just need everything to be closer to one side of the mesh than the other. And you don't want, we don't want anything like sticking out too much. So anyway, that's the idea. Let's give that a save. So there's a little poly figure for us. For the most part, we don't even have to worry about the character. So we'll hide him for a bit and just get the dynamics working on the body. So we've got the most ridiculously low poly. Actually, we will group that and put him in it and move both together. We got some pretty large fields here, but we'll work from that. Okay, so brand new soft body. Simulation, soft body, add in a vertex weight. Use fields, delete. So the basic scaling stuff was all about him entering particular fields. So I guess I deleted some things I didn't necessarily have to, but this field would be his, I guess it's the rest length if we're being technical. So the overall spherical field gets fed in, and then those are the offsets, and then we put the curve, which should say a little bit of power reset to have no tangents, a little bit of power so it doesn't shrink to 0, 50% so it stays bigger on the outside, and that's the doubling force, so that gets fed in. That can be set to a max, and that should be the basics of that. If I frame forward, let's see what happens. Yeah, okay, so you immediately see that falls, ragdolls, like plummets in. But you can see the transition of the colors, and it's running quick and fast, and this is a new soft body, so it's all just running the way it should be. But you see how quickly that's running because we made a low poly version of the character. So the floor, let's give it 25% friction. And yeah, getting dragged along. Okay, so then we start doing the scale stuff. So that's how, yeah, that's all being driven. So now we go into the tag, say that that is the power of the rest length, which is doubled in the beginning. Save that again. Hit go. Bloop. You see that giant wave, and then he shrinks really tiny. So clearly working just fine. The spherical field is kind of boring, given the weird, kind of the weird thing we're trying to do here. We could shrink them down because the original concept was that, but inside this map, why don't we use the spherical field as a mask instead? So if we make a noise, let's just see what happens with the noise. Blurp. Oh my goodness. Oh, the spherical field is still there. That makes sense. Okay, so noise overall. Okay, so is that pure noise? No, it's got scale. Okay, bigger noise with some animation speed. And let's even turn off the field force for a second. Let's just see what this scale does to him. Okay, so now we've got this noise getting animated slowly, and it's affecting different parts of the body. You can see it just randomly scaling and getting all kinds of weird. Let's create a curve to remap that because we want to strengthen it and darken it. So just essentially I'm increasing the contrast. So yeah, already fun and goofy and terrifying. Let's attempt to add a spring. That's going to smooth it out. That's going to spring it. Oh, geez. Oh, there we go. Yeah, see, now we're getting somewhere. He gets real tiny. I don't think we want to go that small, so I think that's this clamp. Yeah. Boom. Oops, sorry about that, fella. And then I wonder if we add just a hint of stiffness on him just to keep that coherent. If we hit 1, does that stop him from scaling too much? No, the stiffness doesn't seem to stop him from scaling. But it does stop his feet from going too crazy. But yeah, you want to go easy with stiffness, especially if you have him dragging across the floor or something. As a quick for instance, let's say we do want the attractor to do something. Let's say we want to tug on his hands. So that's that field. I'll make another one from scratch instead of duplicating. Why not? This tag will be just the pull, and it does use, no, actually it doesn't use fields. I'm going to just select some points here. Set those and set those. Mesh, set vertex weight to 100, please. And inverting, set vertex weight to 0, please. Okay, so now just his hands are got weight, which means in the field force, which is going to be pulling him in, we will mask it by the pull vertex weight. So now only his hands should be getting tugged. Save again. And let's see. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. Unless this, I feel like it should be doing something. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, maybe. Did we put stiffness on there still? Oh, there is still stiffness. That partially explains it. Okay, and now you can see his hands starting to get tugged in that direction. We have to use a surprising amount of strength to do it, though. But yeah, anyway, now his hands are getting tugged and he's getting pulled through the noise fields. Yeah, it's just another option. So, you know, we can tug him in that direction. So now let's try and transfer this into the character and then see how well we can get more than one interacting. So that's all working fine. I'll save it as next version. Okay, now we've got the actual guy. Move this ahead above him. And then inside, we'll do a Mesh Deformer. I found that really quick. I always struggle to find it. It will affect the polygon. Advanced, it will do the surface outside of it. Initialize. That should now have linked everything properly to its different body parts. And in theory, that should run relatively smoothly for us. So, oh my goodness, the poor guy. So, you know, that's, you know, the mesh deformer always does a really good job. Like, it's going to be really tough to tell that this character isn't the thing with Softbody running. We're running the Softbodies on something very simple, but he looks like he's got it running directly on him in like the best way possible. So we can say, okay, yank him over. More. So yeah, so now he's getting yanked around. That's all working just fine. So we're not doing a cloner thing, but we could just name that number 1, copy, paste. That'll be number 2. And drop another one there. And with any luck, wow! Why did he get yanked so hard? But yeah, now we got 2 of them. But once again, it's just those super soft bodies running. Wow. Oh, wow. Oh, I think I understand. The field force weight here is pulling really hard, and it's got a mask, but he doesn't have that same mask. These are treated independently, so you would have to put a completely separate pull on there and have those add together. A slightly unfortunate thing. No, maybe I didn't do that quite right. Bonk. That's going to hurt. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the part right now. Let's just let them flail around a bit. They're very identical, which I don't think they should be. Maybe they are, because of this random field. Where's the random field? It's probably made yeah, it's made as a child. I want both of those to be sharing the same one. So we'll drag that in. So now, oh, that poor little guy. Is that because of the random field? Did I put it in the right tag? I feel like I didn't. That was in the pull. I don't even know what happened there. I'm going to undo that. It should go in here. Yeah. My bad. Blurp. Okay. The spring. It's so ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, you can start seeing how these are pretty fun. And yeah, now they're sharing the same random field, which means they are getting different calculations. And yeah, like we're still running at like 25 frames per second, which is pretty reasonable. So making that entire animation, you can see if we make these reasonable low poly versions, that these can be bouncing off each other, colliding with each other. Let's get a better, or I'm going to just simplify the field for us. Let's not mask it. And it's going to be really powerful. So let me try. Yep, real powerful, 55. I'm surprised. I'm confused by the strength here. Like, wasn't I just at 555 a second ago and it was like crazy overpowered, and now I'm at 555 and it doesn't seem to be doing anything. So, oh wait, it's off. Okay. My bad. Okay, 55. There we go. Reasonable number. So yeah, both of them getting pulled in. The overall dynamics could probably use a bit of damping. Even a 90%. That'll stop them from like super overshooting. And then we should be able to get just like a pile of these all getting pulled into one spot. But the the soft bodies and everything are being pretty wonderful and ridiculous. Blurp, blurp. So obviously every time we add one in, it's going to significantly slow us down. But let's add in 4. Why not? Where? Here they go. Bronk. Let's see. What do I want to do? Unfortunately, well, I mean, here's the unfortunate part is like we can't select more than one vertex tag at a time. But we did externalize the random field. Oh, it'd probably be a good idea to put these into a group effector so we can run the group effector. But yeah, you can see how messy that's getting in the best possible way. But if we shrink the scale of the noise, then that can be messier. And if we go 4 times the speed, there's still that springiness, which will be making it more reasonable. But now there should be a lot more chaos in it. So now we just got like this flailing mass of like limbs going around. And once again, like, you know, keep in mind that the reality of what's going on is the very simple low poly version, and even those take a while to calculate. But you know, imagine trying to run those simulations on like this full thing. It would never work. It would explode instantly. But look how coherent this is. And these are, keep in mind, these are colliding with each other. These are self-colliding. So it's, you know, a full-on calculation. We didn't even increase our steps per frame. We're at a real-world scale here, and these have not broken. So it gets weird, but it works. So yeah, I think that I don't know if this original one was made in cinema, but I don't see anything here that essentially we don't kind of have set up right now. Like the way they get pulled in right there is pretty great, but you saw just based on the stretchiness and everything that we have that we do have the ability to do those. Yeah, it's really fun. I'd like to push that further at some point, but at this point, yeah, we are over time. Let me up here, yeah, ask if, let me see if there's any questions to finish the thought. Pierre's asking, is there any reason I didn't use the remesher to create a cage for the Mesh Deformer? Pretty much I wanted to make it as absolutely low poly as I could, and the remesher has the possibility of making holes, and it doesn't guarantee that it's going to have the same poly count left and right, and it doesn't, essentially, you know, it just might not give a good final mesh, especially because I don't think that these are one mesh. Like, every part of him is a different, you know, like the shirt's a different piece than the arms, than all of them. So then at that point, and I have done this type of thing before. In fact, just for the sake of example, let's copy that into a new file, reset him. Oh, the Mesh Deformer. What we'd have to do is, let me show you. If we put in the remesher, I just have no idea what this is going to do, but I don't imagine it's going to be too good for us. It's attempting to keep the poly counts, by the way, but it's not one mesh. And if it's not one mesh, then the soft bodies would rip them apart. But if we start trying to reduce this, I mean, it's doing an okay job. I don't really care about the materials, but you look how many polygons are still on the arm. So even if once I lower it pretty low, yeah, this is exactly what I thought might happen, is it's turned into a triangle, and I wanted it to be a quad. And in addition to that, like, it's now putting a hole in the arm, and this mesh, these body parts aren't interconnected. So, you know, it's doing a pretty dang good job overall, considering what we're asking it to do automatically. Like, this process is not simple, but we are not getting a perfect mesh. And then what it turns into is like, okay, instead you throw that into a volume builder, and then put that into a mesher, and then we have to subdivide that enough so we get relatively high poly. But even here you see we're losing parts of the fingers, so that doesn't have detail. And then typically what I would do is use a dilate and again inflate it a bit, which does fill it out more without having to go too high poly. And then maybe that goes into a remesher, but I still think you end up with the same problem. Yeah, look, this, once we get, this is maybe, like right now visually, that's about the poly count that I did. But you can see that we transitioned into some random triangles. This overall arm is a triangle. The hand got disconnected. There's holes. There's holes inside the body. So there'd be a lot of cleanup. So I literally stopped at one point. I was like, oh, could we use the volume mesher? And then I was going to use the remesher. And I was like, no, that's going to make too messy of a mesh once you start asking it to go really far down. You know, but, you know, could you have done this and then spent a little time cleaning up? Absolutely. And would that work for you? It absolutely might. But me choosing exactly where to put the polygons, exactly where I wanted them, was just for me the best way to do that. But yeah, I mean, and there was a lot going on obviously in that animation with a lot of these characters, but you know, that just goes to, you got to cache things out and to see them run in real time. The fact that we're getting a somewhat reasonable playback right now with 4 of them is pretty good. And it's not nothing to have this remesher doing its thing. I'm curious if I were to just delete all the characters. Well, actually, no, that the remesher seems to be running super quick. So here's the original ones, but we didn't gain any steps per frame by deleting out the characters. So, but yeah, this is what's really doing the simulations. It's keeping it nice and clean. Any follow-up questions? Yeah, that should wrap this up. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. Oh, there might be a question there. Oh, no, we did tackle that one. No, I'm not going to tackle a new question at this point. But make sure you're here next week, CG Soho, or maybe the week after, because next week is going to be a plugin launch. But in any case, where is my software? There it is. In any case, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. Make sure you're following Rocket Lasso on the Slack channel. Did somebody put a link in the Slack or the question recently? Yes, they did. Thank you, Tobias. You can join the Slack channel at this address, where if you join the live channel, then I @ the entire channel so you get an alert when I'm going live. So it's a good way to not miss the show. In addition, I'm going to be releasing a new plugin on Tuesday next week, unless something really bad happens, or we find some horrible bug we have to fix or something. But that's the plan, launching a plugin on Tuesday. That should be fun. We're reaching the end of the season here. There's probably only going to be a few more episodes, so make sure you tune in for that. But I do have some extra tutorial ideas, some different projects in the works, an idea for a big project, and of course we're working on more tools all the time. But in any case, that should wrap this up. Make sure you're joining Slack, and I'll see you guys next week for the plugin launch. So thank you so much. I'll see you then. Let me click this button, and then we'll click, what do we want to watch this time? How about the recall ad? Bye-bye, everybody.